And now I'm going to tell you where we're up to. We do use the blue annotated siddur, and we're in the middle of the Amida. We are actually on page 48. So quickly, because I know I do it every week, but it just helps us to remember the first three brachot of the Amida are a praise to Hashem, and then we have the bulk of our brachot. 6 of them are personal blessing requests, and then 6 of them are communal requests. And we're finishing off the personal requests, and with the very last one at the bottom of the page, which we spoke about a lot last time, but I'm going to just say one thing that we didn't mention was the bracha of sustenance. It is the last blessing because that is the fundamental bracha that we want besides health, which was beforehand. Health and sustenance are the 2 primary things that we need in order to live a fulfilling life. And, you know, if we don't have our health and we don't have any sustenance, then nothing else is manageable. So these are the 2 primary ones for personal needs. And we spoke about the fact that it used the words that we should be satisfied, because no matter what we have, being satisfied is in and of itself a bracha. What I didn't mention to you last week was to look at the 2 little words for the, and you'll see them kind of in different sides of the page, what we say for summer and what we say for winter. So we say bracha for the summer months, which is from, I would say from Pesach until, you know, and I will tell you until, and then the winter months, we say the other one, Tal Umata Livracha. So the first question that comes to mind is, if we go back a page, haven't we just said that already? On page 46, we also have something for the summer and the winter months. We say Morid Hatal, and we say Mashav Aruach or Morid Hageshem. And they seem very similar and they're a little bit different. And I just want to tell you why we would repeat what seems to be the same request here. So do you remember I mentioned to you that the first 3 brachot of the Amida are really an introductory prayer, praising Hashem, and also invoking the 3 Avot, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. This bracha in the beginning is really talking about praise, showing Hashem's gevura, it's his strength. We spoke about the fact that rain has if it comes down in huge amounts, it is not helpful, that Hashem has to have a restraint when he gives us the rain. So saying Morid Hatal, Mashav Aruach, Morid Hageshem in the second blessing of the Amida is really talking about Hashem, praising Hashem. Now in this bracha, it's a whole different thing, because now we are actually asking. We're asking for rain and we're asking for dew in the right season. And therefore, it's interesting to see that the seasons are a little bit different. It doesn't follow the same exact timing as we would do if we would the first couple of brachas. The first couple of brachas are from Pesach till Shmini Atzeret, the end of Sukkot, and then from Shmini Atzeret to Pesach. Here, it's changed a little bit, asking for Tal Umata Livracha in the winter months starts, and it says here, it's actually gives a secular date. It's the 7th, it's the 5th of December. Why does it seem to be picking such a random date? Why don't we just keep it with the end of Sukkot like we do when we're praising Hashem for the rain that he gives? And it's interesting to note, because we are asking for rain, that this is actually coincides, if everywhere around the world you would imagine would then be asking for rain at a different time, because our seasons are very different. If this is seasonal and we're asking God to give us rain in the right season, we are going with the seasons of Israel. We know that a land like Egypt has the Nile that can irrigate it, but Israel is very dependent on Hashem's bracha for rain. And because all of our blessings come through the land of Israel, that when we're asking for a personal bracha, we're asking that the land of Israel have the right amount of rain in the right season. Again, then why doesn't it start from Shmini Atzeret? Well, actually in Israel, they do this change of bracha on the 7th day of Cheshvan. And the reason for this was, historically, the Jewish people would all go up for the Shalosh Regalim. They would all go up 3 times a year to the pilgrim festivals. If right after the pilgrim festival of Sukkot, at Shmini Atzeret, we'd be asking for rain and then hoping God would give it right away, the people who would be making the big trek back would have rain on them. So in order to allow the people to travel back to their homes, that's when, on the 7th of Cheshvan, people would say, okay, now collectively, we can ask for rain. Although it's in the 7th of Cheshvan in Israel, we push it off just that little bit until December, because we don't need rain so early, and it wouldn't be devastating if Israel didn't get rain until that time. So the rabbis have kind of made like the latest time for where it's still connected to Israel, but we are asking for our own rain in its season. So that was just an interesting thing to note. And another thing that I found interesting was the fact that before it uses the word geshem, and now it uses the word matar. And the difference is, again, when we were talking about geshem, we were talking it more as a praise and showing God's strength, that Hashem has this ability to bring this rain, and it's part of this bracha of Gevura. Remember we said it was Chesed, Gevura, and Tiferes. This was part of the strength blessing. Matar is more of a word that's in line with the sentiments that was brought up when we studied the Shema about rain being a reward for, as it says, if you keep the mitzvah, I will give you rain in its proper season. So what are we asking for in this bracha? We're not only saying, Hashem, give us the rain in its season, it's saying, please help us deserve that rain as a reward. Give us that lifestyle, help us live. We can't ask Hashem to give us something because we obviously have to put in the effort, but allow us to live the type of life where we have enough merit that Hashem will give us rain in its proper season. And that is why it is used, a different terminology is used in this bracha. Okay, so that is the bracha of sustenance. We've gone into it quite depth last week. And now we're going to go on to the 6 brachot that are considered communal brachot. So it is interesting that us, I would say, as a nation, and we can see it very much so with what is happening now, today, in real time, that anything that happens to our people feels very much like it's happening to us. That we are a community-based nation, no matter where we are dispersed amongst our people. And therefore, these next 6 brachot, even though they are community-based and we're all talking about us collectively, it's also a very personal prayer. I see what everybody is doing to help the poor refugees in Ukraine, and how Israel has accepted all these Jewish refugees, and how we are trying so hard to support the organizations and the Jewish orphanages, because we are like one body. And I know I've used the analogy many times. If my little pinky hurts, if my pinky is cut, my entire body feels it. It's not like, okay, this is a separate to my ear that, that I might have an infection, or my toe that might be stubbed. Any individual part of the body that is hurting, it affects my entire being. And I think that is so with the Jewish people, that we each, Kol Yisrael Arev Zeh Lazeh, that we are all interconnected with Hashem as our father. And the analogy is used many times in the Amidah of a father and a king, and we are all his children. So having communal requests is very important, but it's not just a communal request, it becomes a personal request. So let's go into the very first communal request that we have. It is on the top of page 49, and it says, "Sound the great shofar for your freedom. Raise a banner to gather our exiles and bring us together from the four corners of the earth into our land. Blessed are you, Lord, who gathers the dispersed of his people Israel. So, first of all, what is this talking about? We know that we have already spoken about that we want Hashem to redeem us when we had, again, the personal brachot, and I will find it right here, Go'al Yisrael. I will find it. I think it is, yes, on the top of page 48, we asked Hashem to redeem us speedily. And I mentioned then that that was a personal redemption, asking God to help us with whatever personal difficulties and challenges we are going. This is actually talking about Mashiach and a global redemption. It is a natural progression from the last bracha, because the last bracha was talking about having the opportunity to have produce and for Hashem to make a good yield and a good crop. And we know that many of the mitzvot that we have are not able to be performed because we don't have Mashiach. All of the agricultural mitzvot that are like the bikurim, the first fruits, or teruma, or maaseh, all of these things are not able to be done. So that is perhaps why this was put right over here. Another thing it says is Takab shofar gadol, the great shofar. According to the Midrash, by the sacrifice of Isaac, Abraham found his ram, and there was two horns. There was a left horn and a right horn. The left horn was the one that was sounded at the giving of the Torah. We know that there was a great shofar blast that got exponentially louder and louder and louder by when Matan Torah was given, when the Torah was given at Har Sinai. But the great shofar, the one on the right, the big shofar, is being kept and reserved for the times of Mashiach. So even though the revelation at Mount Sinai was something so astronomical, because it was when God actually gave us his Torah and it showed himself to us as a nation, there is nothing compared to the great shofar that will be sounded at the time of Mashiach. Now it says, sound the great shofar for our freedom and raise the banner for our exiles. So I think what it's saying here, according to a lovely explanation that I read, is that when we say, we don't even say God's name, we say sound the great shofar, it means that what are we asking Hashem here? We're not only asking Hashem to bring Mashiach, we're asking Hashem to sound this shofar, sound this alarm, sound this bugle, so to speak, to help stimulate us to even want Mashiach. And then when we wanted, where would we go? We would go to raise the banner. Like if you have an analogy, I would imagine, of a flagpole. You've been in camp, right? And they say, okay, where should we gather? Gather at the flagpole. What would that flagpole be? It would be Israel. So what are we asking Hashem for here? What is our request? Besides asking for Mashiach, and this is kind of profound, we're asking to want Mashiach. Because many times in our history, we have been through tragedy and we've been through persecution. From way back, there's been really challenges and difficulties. And at that time, yes, I would imagine we would want to have Mashiach. We want to have a better life. But what about now? What about a time when we're living in affluent Thornhill, where we seem to think that we have everything we have? We have beautiful homes, we have the comforts. Like, do we really want Mashiach? Is that sounding of the shofar something that is internal and something that is that we have a desire for? So the belief of Mashiach is, as we know, one of the 13 principles of faith. It is one of the bases of our faith. And I would say that the belief in Mashiach has never been lost over time. There's a belief in Mashiach. We know that Mashiach is going to come, but the desire for Mashiach the wanting for Mashiach has really over the years perhaps only happened when our people have been through times of turbulence and sorrow and strife. But I really believe that it was the Rebbe who kind of changed our whole perspective on this. And he was the one who said that since he was a little child, he envisioned this utopia where there would be no more suffering, where there would be Mashiach. And when he first became Rebbe, his first mission statement was that it is the mission, his first statement at one of his discourses on the very first gathering that he had, he said, it is our generation's mission to bring Mashiach. And basically all of time, from the going out of Egypt, all of that time, from the Exodus, from all the trials and tribulations that we've been through, every single thing has led up to this. So basically, what we're saying is that the hope and the desire for Mashiach is what this world was created for. We know that every time we have this class, we talk a little bit about how we can make our lives a little bit more meaningful and say, okay, why am I here? Is it just to have my copy? Is it just to do this, just to that? Or how we can step outside of ourselves a little bit and make our whole existence, which is such a fleeting existence if we think about it. It is so short. This came to mind. I wanted to share with you that my aunt passed away yesterday. She was a very, very lovely lady who lived in Switzerland, and I didn't have a lot to do with her. Her name was Esther Bas Yitzchak. She was a very, very special lady, and we weren't very connected familiar-wise, but it was really a time for me to contemplate. She was a beautiful woman. She had so much going for her. And now she's passed away. And I kept on thinking yesterday, like, what is the measure of a life? How does one put a person's life into context? And I'm thinking, well, it's what we leave behind. It's our legacy. It's our good deeds. So it's very hard for us to think of that as we're here living our lives and rushing around with carpool or helping our grandchildren or whatever else we're doing. But having that mindfulness moment is so important. And for me, I believe that the mindfulness moment of this bracha is to really say, are we wanting Mashiach enough, or are we becoming a little bit, thank you, Helga, are we becoming a little bit complacent? So the Rebbe said that Mashiach is not only a reward for good behavior, it's an outgrowth of all the mitzvot that we do. And the analogy given often is that of a scale. And if we imagine this whole scale, this whole world as a scale, and that one extra thing that you do, whether it is smiling at a friend or calling your neighbor or being kind to your grandchild who's driving you crazy or whatever the case may be, whatever it is, a mitzvah that you do today could actually be the tipping point in this global thing called Mashiach. And to understand it globally, that this is a global destiny is a little bit easier for us to understand now that we see social media and how quickly the whole world can be galvanized and the whole world can see things, whether it was COVID or now the war in Ukraine. It is very easy for each and every one of us, whether you live in Ethiopia or England or Switzerland or South Africa, wherever you are, we can all rally around. And so social media and the communications that are so widespread has us able to understand how we can collectively understand this concept that there could really be Mashiach that comes speedily, and we should want Mashiach. The Rebbe started a song for little kids that says, Am Yisrael, have no fear, Mashiach will be here this year. We want Mashiach now. And I was a little girl when he first introduced this song, I'm thinking, we want Mashiach now. Like, what is a little 5-year-old? What is a little 6-year-old? What is a little 40-year-old or a little 60-year-old or a little 80-year-old say, we want Mashiach now? But I think the Rebbe was teaching us that, yes, it's not only something that we believe in conceptually, Ani ma'amin be'emunah shalema. I believe in the coming of Mashiach conceptually. It's one of the 13 principles of faith. So if I'm a practicing and believing Jew, I believe in this concept. The question is, do I want it? And if I do want something, what am I doing? And all we need to know is all we need to do is do that one extra mitzvah. And I believe that that's why the Rebbe started the mitzvah campaigns, because he just said, if every single person in this world does one extra act of kindness, one extra goodness, then that will create so much light that Mashiach will come. So again, if we're trying to have that mindfulness moment and we come up to this prayer and this request, asking God to sound the great shofar, perhaps we can think to ourselves, do I really want Mashiach? Yes, maybe now we do when we see the upheaval of the world. But if I wanted personal Mashiach and collective Mashiach, then what am I doing? Am I being part of that mission to make the world a better place? And it was actually on the 28th day of Nisan that the Rebbe said, I have done all that I can. I've done everything I can with everything that I have. And now I leave it up to you. So if we are that generation, and it really does feel like Mashiach's times with all the upheaval in the world, what can we do? And if you say you can't, it's inconsequential, it's not inconsequential. Every single little drop, I know there's a story, it just came to mind. So of a king who wanted, they wanted to honor him by his birthday, filling up this big barrel of wine. And everyone was supposed to, the village was supposed to take a cup and pour in a little bit of wine. So everyone in the village says it's going to be so much wine. It's okay if I just put mine little bit of water, no one will know, and it'll cost me a lot less. So obviously what happened on the day of the great celebration, the king came with this humongous barrel of wine, you know, and the whole town was out celebrating that he was supposed to open up this faucet and get wine. And of course, what came out was water, because every single person said, I don't really make a difference. Everyone around me will be giving the wine. I'll just give that little bit of water. I won't make a difference. But we do make a difference. Every little drop, every little mitzvah that you do really, really, really makes a difference to this, to the coming of Mashiach. So that is what this prayer is all about. So now let's get up.
Isn't that a great story? Thank you.
Yeah. So now let's go and talk a little bit about the next. Oh, I did mention every time that each prayer has something to do in our histories, where the angel first said these prayer. This prayer, b'shofar gadol l'cheresenu, sound the great shofar for the gatherings, was actually said by the Malachim when Jacob reunited with his family, because he had been estranged from his family, not only his son Joseph, but his family. When they finally all came back as a family together, the angel said this bracha, this words of praise, and that's why we say, who gathers the dispersed of his people Israel, and we know that another name for Yaakov is Israel. So it's talking about his family. And that's when the Malachim first composed this. And then later it was brought down to be a more personal bracha. Okay. Now let's go on to the next one. Hashivenu Sheftenu Kavir Shana. Restore our judges as in former times, and our counselors as in the days of yore. Remove from us sorrow and sighing, and reign over us. You alone, O Lord, with kindness and compassion, with righteousness and with justice. Blessed are you, Hashem, King, who loves righteousness and who loves justice. So again, I would imagine that this is a natural progression. We are asking for a collective gathering of the exiles. We know that Jews are from all four corners of the world, and we're asking Hashem to gather us together, and then when we are gathered together, to give us judges, because then judges will rule. And it's interesting that there's two different terminologies here. Restore our judges as in former times, and our counselors as in the days of old, the days of yore. So what are we asking? We're asking for two different things here. A judge is somebody that you have to follow the rules, whether you like it or not, right? It's somebody who sets the laws and makes the mandates and say, this is what you have to do. A counselor is somebody you go to because you want to. If somebody wants to be helped, then that's when they go to a counselor. It's somebody that you want to listen to. So we're asking Hashem here that Hashem should give us both things collectively as a nation. When we come back to Israel, we should, yes, we'll have all the laws that are set in place, but we also want the leaders and the people that we go to for counsel and for advice. Another interesting thing is that it says over here, and remove from us sighing, sorrow and sighing, or sorrow and woe. And anacha has the same numerical value as din, which is severity. So we're asking God that, yes, we might have to be judged, but remove from anything that could be considered din or severity or a harsh judgment. Make our judgment that little bit easier. And then it says, and you alone have kindness and compassion. We know that Hashem has kindness and compassion, but you judge, but tzedek uva mishpat. What is the difference between tzedek and mishpat? Tzedek comes from the word tzedakah. Now, if I would say the word tzedakah, most people would say that means charity. But actually, the word tzedakah comes from the word tzedek, which means justice. Because God, when he asks us to give charity, he's asking us to do what's right, not what's charitable. Giving tzedakah is a tzedek, it's a just, it's what we have to do. So we're asking Hashem to judge us. And either, well, there's different ways, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but to find judges that are measured, that are righteous, and also that means what is deserved. It's a measured amount. Tzedek means a measured, deserved amount. We want judges to give us what is measured and what's deserved. Mishpat is much more justice. It's much more for those who have wronged us. It's talking about people who have made it challenging for us in the past. So there is two different types of judgment. Now, again, to make this personal, we are not only talking about when we go back to Israel, we would like Hashem to reinstate judges as of old. We're also talking about a personal judgment here. And it refers to the judgment that we get daily, that we get on Rosh Hashanah, and also that we get for Olam Haba in the world to come. And that's a whole different class about the afterlife and what does judgment mean and what Hashem really does when we are judged, and why we say Kaddish for only 11 months and what happens to our neshama after it passes away. But all of that judgment is referenced here. And perhaps that is why there's a little bit of a change in the 10 days of Teshuvah between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. You, instead of saying Melech Ohev Tzedakah Mishpat, you say HaMelech HaMishpat, the King of Judgment, because we're alluding to the fact that this is not only talking collectively about judges that will be restored as in former times, we're also talking about our own personal judgment that Hashem has on us. And on a deeper Kabbalistic level, I read something and I thought it was, again, interesting to me, so I hope it's interesting to you, that this judgment is not just only talking about judges that Hashem has judging us every day, which is kind of a little bit scary, or the judgment that will happen in the world to come, or even the judges that will happen when Mashiach comes. This on a deeper level is talking about, because it says judges, it's talking about the two judges that we have inside of us, which are really two drives that kind of want to lay down the law, want to have jurisdiction over us. And those are our inner voices, one that has a more spiritual leaning and one that has more leaning to self-gratification. and they battle for dominion every single day. And we're asking Hashem to restore both judges, that both are necessary in the living of a holistic life. You know, I love that word, holistic. What does that mean? It means that we amalgamate different things to make it whole, to make it complete, to make it healthy. So we're saying, yes, our godly drive, the one that really just wants to connect, to be spiritual, should harness some of our passions. And our passion should work together to be more in line with our spiritual side. We're asking Hashem to help both of our different pulling inside of us, that they should work harmoniously and together. And so I think that when we say this request, or this, tefillah, this bracha, we're asking, not only to restore the judges when Mashiach comes, not only that Hashem should judge us favorably, but also that we ourselves, our own inner judges inside of us, should work holistically together, that somehow we have the strength as we go about our day to try to amalgamate the two, to try to have both the spiritual side and the more everyday self-gratification side work together. And that is really, I think, most of our struggle every day. Like, how do we make our day spiritual without it being that spiritual that it becomes, not a really realistic life? How do we, combine these two? And perhaps this is what is the request that we're asking for in this bracha. Okay, and now we come to, so where in our history did the angels say this exact bracha? Is when Hashem passed down Hashem's laws to the Jewish people, and specifically the laws of justice. Then this is when the Malachim said this. Okay, now I know it's already past my time. It's up to you. Do you want me to continue for one more bracha, or should we leave it here and continue next time? We can continue. It's I don't want to take too much of it. Okay. So I'm just going to quickly, and we will go into it more again when we pick up this course.
Let's continue.
I'm
Thank
happy
you.
to continue as well.
Okay, just really quickly then. We're going to talk about the Lamal Shinim, and this is an interesting, because bracha request, because it seems very, very severe, but there's a lot of history and a lot of context to it. So when we say this bracha, I just want you to understand where the history comes in, where the context of this, and so we can understand how it fits into this whole narrative. So the first thing I want to tell you is that we know that this is called the 18 brachat, the Shmona Esrei, but there are 19 blessings. We spoke earlier on why we still maintain the words, the 18 blessings, because it has to do with the spine, etc. But this was the bracha that was inserted. This was the additional bracha that was put in as the 19th blessing, and that has continued throughout the millennium. So what is it about? So when we read it, it seems a little harsh, but let's read it together. Let there be no hope for informers, and may all the heretics and all the wicked people instantly perish. May all the enemies of your people be speedily extirpated, eradicated. And may you swiftly uproot, break, crush, and subdue the reign of wickedness speedily in our days. Blessed are you, Hashem, who crushes enemies and subdues the wicked. So just reading this, you would imagine, and it's true, that this was put in a historical context, because there was at the time of after the destruction of the first Bet HaMikdash, when the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, the men of the Great Assembly, compiled the Amidah. Many years later, about 400 years later, to be exact. This was just before the time of the Common Era. Rabbi Gamliel, who was the grandson of Hillel, I'm sure you've all heard of Hillel, the great sage. His grandson, Rabbi Gamliel, was the head of the Torah institution at that time that was in Yavne. And there was a lot of disruption in Jewish life. There was a lot of people who were challenging the validity of the Torah. And that had started actually in the Hasmoneim or the Hashmonaim period. But in those days, people were just trying to modernize Judaism. This was many people coming together and saying that the divine aspect of the Torah doesn't exist. That yes, we believe in Torah, but not from a divinic source, from the divine. It wasn't Hashem, it was just man-made, a set of laws, etc. And so Rabbi Gamliel really thought it was very important to publicly denounce this, because these were people who were really trying very hard to undermine our faith. And he wanted to preserve the Judaism as we have it today. And you see that he was successful. Now, why was it kept in if this was such a small time in our history? Because a very, very short time later was the beginning of Christianity. And how did Christianity start? It actually started with Jews who felt themselves that they believed in the Torah and they also believed in JC, right? They believed in both. And they had many spies within the whole area who said, like, who would come in and infiltrate because they looked Jewish on the outside, they felt Jewish. They just had a whole different concept of what Judaism meant. And when the Jewish people were having their aspirations to build the second temple, there was many informers and many spies that would come in and then go to the Romans and say that they're trying to be independent, they're trying to build a second temple. Remember that the early Jewish Christians didn't believe that they needed to be a second temple because they already believed that the ultimate sacrifice had been made. So there was a very different theological twist to it. And so they would come in and they would inform, and a lot of the leaders were arrested. It was a very tremendous, turbulent time. So this was kept in as part of over many, many years. It was kept in because when the Chazan would get up and say, and to the informers and to the Nalmashnim and those who informers and all the heretics, if you were from the early Christian sect, you would either not answer amen or wouldn't reveal yourself, you wouldn't join in this blessing. And so this was one way to weed out, and that's why the word informers were here. It's also interesting to note that it starts with the Lamalshinim and to the informers, because perhaps I read somewhere that perhaps there was other words that came before, which was Meshumadim, which are apostates, people who don't really believe. But because there was a lot of people who were censors, they might have taken that out. So it could have read and to the apostates and to the informers, but those words were taken out. So this was a blessing that had a lot of historical context of people that really tried to undermine the fabric of Judaism, which is the belief in one Hashem given the Torah at Mount Sinai. And it is something that we hold on to very dearly. And so that is where this bracha comes in historically. Continuing last bracha, when I said there's a Kabbalistic twist to it, Rabbi Isaac Luria gave a Kabbalistic twist to this bracha as well. He said that when we're talking about crushing, because it says here, you should remove, see over here, you should exit, you should remove instantly, crush and to break. That is talking about the things that are purely impure, that in our lives that we called, there's certain klipot, there are certain things that are totally impure. But when it talks about subduing, that is talking about the aspects of our lives that is called more like a klipat noga, according to Kabbalistic terms, which means that things that are not good and not bad, like food, for example. Subduing is in the context of taking something in our life that is not necessarily good, but could be used as good. It's not necessarily bad, but could be used as bad. It's all of those things that are average, right? That could be used either way, and helping us use them in the right way. And another interesting thing about the word subdue is that here, look what we're saying. We're saying that Hashem should help eradicate. Basically, it's saying that we never have, unless you are somebody's actually trying to hurt you and to kill you, we don't have the right to stand up and to physically hurt somebody who is perhaps not doing the right thing, unless they're trying to hurt us. But we can ask Hashem. So it's asking Hashem. But look what it's asked, what Hashem asks. He adds that help us subdue, because what is our preference? Our preference is that people return, that people become good. There was a famous Rebbe called Rabbi Meir, and he would say that, all the bad people should be eradicated. And he had a very, very smart and wonderful wife, and her name was Bruria. And she said, when he would say, Chata min haaretz, you should eradicate, all the evildoers from this world. She said, no, chata means chet. You should eradicate the evil, not the evildoers, the sin and not the sinners. And we have to very much extrapolate somebody who's being not the best that they could be from that person themselves, and we're asking Hashem to take away the sins of people, not necessarily the sinners. So I just thought that this was an important bracha to understand the historical context and why we say it. And perhaps the message, if we're trying to get a message for ourselves, is that yes, there are many things in our lives that we just don't go there. They're sins. God has to crush them and help us crush them. But there are many things that are this klipat noga, as we say. They can go either way. And it's up to us to use our seichel, to use our insight, to use our fortitude. And we're asking Hashem to help us, subdue any of those, to be channeled, I would say. Subdue is maybe another word, is to channel all these things in the proper way. So I want to thank you for joining us. I know we're only halfway there, but this was a 6-week course. It's built an 8-week course, but I will continue after Pesach as we expand, because there is so much. It's not only when we get to the Amida and the few remaining brachot after that, then we have finished Shachrit, and that's amazing. But then there is, what about all the things that we have to add for the holidays? And what about all the extra things that we have to do for Shabbat? And what does the Musaf prayer? So there is so much more to learn and to explore. And I'm looking forward to explore it with you together after Pesach. Thank you so much, and wishing you all.
Thank you so much, and enjoy your holiday.
Chag Sameach. Happy Purim, everyone. Happy Purim. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy Purim, ladies.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.